Nationalism. The etymology. It is derived in 1800s. 1844, devotion to one's country. Not as nation, nationalism and native directly to be born and to spring forth. Al, of a king or pertaining to. National, concerned with or pertaining to a nation. And ism, the distinctive doctrine or theory of. Description: love of country and willingness to sacrifice for it. The doctrine that a national culture and interests are superior to any other. The doctrine that nations should act independently rather than collectivity to attain goals. The aspiration for national independence felt by people under foreign domination.
Globalist is a person that wants the globe to do well, frankly, not caring about our country so much. And you know what? We can't have that. You know, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
Okay, so we have here the definition of European nationalism. So as what we can see in here, European nationalism, this is very particular to the English people. Their nationalism is actually inclined to a Puritanism or the Puritan Revolution. So to understand the concept of nationalism in England, we should go back to its historical context. Puritan Revolution is an effect or a result of Age of Enlightenment, which was started when Martin Luther presented a thesis against a Catholic Church. Now, this Puritan Revolution aims to cleanse the remnants of Catholic Church and to establish a new society which is inclined to Lutheran Church or Anglican churches. Now, as we go along, we can see the image of a English philosopher, which is John Locke, a very well-renowned philosopher in many fields. This political philosophy of John Locke became a source or the founding elements of British nationalism. Although it doesn't directly point out nationalism per se, but it developed nationalism among British people or English people. Again, in understanding the nationalism of British people, we cannot see here the pure nationalism because they are a monarchical societies. So it is really hard to define nationalism in a monarchical setup. Although, based on our definition, the writings of John Locke became the founding elements in French and American nationalism. So, when we go with the French nationalism, Rousseau, he particularly focused on the popular meaning of nationalism, which is sovereignty. He had this idea of popular sovereignty and general cooperation. It is really important to discuss sovereignty coinciding with nationalism because it's impossible to fight for nationalism without sovereignty. Again, if we dig deeper what sovereignty is, it is the independence of a state with another state without any interference from outside states. So it's really important about nationalism. Now, as we go further, nationalism was propagated by Napoleon's Bonaparte army to concentrate the power. Napoleon's army uses nationalism to to have a cooperation among people. So it's really important to have nationalism while concentrating power.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe.
We have here German nationalism. So this is actually modern among other topic we have discussed because this is actually a World War II topic. This is a pre-modern history. Nationalism in German is actually associated with Nazi party or yung Nazism. So with Nazism, we have here a fascist dictator, Adolf Hitler, which is inspired by Benito Mussolini of Italy. Now, with nationalism under Nazi party, it's really fearful because it aims to cleanse the society with less inferior race. For example, in a Nazi party, they have this genocide act of killing Jews because this party believes that Jews are a inferior race. So they use the idea of nationalism to legalize genocide. So Hitler intensify nationalism as a weapon among critics or other minority. So this is one of the negative side of nationalism, a negative effect or usage of nationalism.
It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand.
Now let's go with nationalism in Africa. So again, it's really important to understand his historical context of a continent or a country. Now, Africa became a fertile ground of imperialism. British, French, Spanish, even America or United States. Now, nationalism in Africa is actually associated with their fight against apartheid system or this racial discrimination. It was initiated by the most famous Nelson Mandela. Can you focus on North American nationalism? So the definition here says that this is a new nationalism. This is a branding of nationalism. So this is a political philosophy of Theodore Roosevelt, one of presidents in the U.S. He was influenced by Herbert Crowley's The Promise of American Life. So nationalism in U.S. is associated with the American life. So what is American life? This is a civilized, more prosperous life compared to other nation. So that's what they promise to American people, an American life, a modern life. So further, we have here the reason why Theodore Roosevelt used nationalism. This is just to reconcile both different parties, the Republican and then the Democrats. So he tried to use the idea of new nationalism or this American life to give one path to different poles of the society, which by our definition, he was unsuccessful to become a progressive, because again, the idea of a progressive society is declined by US people because they are afraid that this might be used on communism.
Vamos a leer una carta del compañero Ernesto Guevara.
Fidel, siento que he cumplido la parte de mi deber que me ataba a la revolución cubana en su territorio y me despido de ti, de los compañeros.
This is a nationalism on Latin America or the South American people. Now let's focus on Ernesto Che Guevara. Again, he is a communist leader, and the very reason why he's part of this is because of nationalism. So, the centrality of healthcare to Cuban nationalism expressed political and social values. Now, the victory of healthcare and education is the center of nationalism in Cuba. It is not just being exposed in mass media, but before COVID-19, Cuba became one of the top successful countries in terms of medicine, including literacy and education. And this is how they centralize nationalism. The nationalism on Asia. Okay, so nationalism began to appear in Asia after World War I, establishment of League of Nations. They give some very particular leader. We have Mahatma Gandhi of India and Sun Yat-sen, the Republic of China. First leader of Communist Party in China is Mao Zedong. So he developed the idea of Maoism, which is inclined with Leninism and Marxism. Now, there's still the idea of Chinese nationalism under Mao Zedong, but this is incorporated with communism. Nationalism in postmodern Philippines. So let's focus on our own country on this. Now we have here Carlos P. Romulo. This particular statement was written by Stephen Bosworth, ambassador of the United States to the Philippines. He stipulated here that Mr. Romulo was a Filipino nationalist who is partner of constructive criticism. Carlos P. Romulo is also an author of a contemporary nationalism and world orders. He was known as a nationalistic politician. He actually ran for president, but people was afraid because he is too nationalistic. Further, we have nationalism under martial law. So we have here the infamous dictator Ferdinand Marcos. And Marcos actually break the two-party system of Philippines. Before his regime, the Philippines has only a two-party system patterned in US. We have Nationalista and Liberal Party. So Nationalista is the conservative, while Liberal Party is a progressive party. Now Marcos created a kilusang ng bagong lipunan. Also, this is actually intensified with the idea of one thought, one nation, or isang diwa, isang nasyon. Alright. He used nationalism to create a totalitarian government. The reason why I am referring on this because this is under the idea of nationalism. All of this is circulating in the idea of nationalism. People are being deceived by the idea that Marcos is trying to give a birth to a new society with the idea of nationalism. Which in fact, if we're going to read conjugal dictatorship, it is only the vested interest of two people which was prioritized. We have the Oceania nationalism, or very particular in Australia. Historical background again with Australia, they are still a commonwealth of British, same as Canada. So it's really hard to derive nationalism in a country which is part of an imperial government. But again, they still stick with the idea of nationalism. On our definition, they're trying to lessen the immigrants from other country. They want to prioritize Australian people for the country itself. So that's one part of a nationalism. And this idea was actually inspired by Joseph Purfey. So he was a novelist and he instilled nationalism to Australian people. Actually, he was inspired by the same novel which inspired Dr. Rizal, which is Uncle Tom Cabin. So that's for nationalism.